And he was clearly emotional at the convention when he gave that speech. That was 4 or 5 days out. But then a few days later, he's back at it. And, I was listening to a speech yesterday, J.D. Vance. He's like, his VP said, "This man took a bullet for you and didn't miss a day of work." And it's like, it's true,
That's right.
It's just the whole thing.
And his rallies, I try to watch all the candidates' rallies if I can. And his are very funny. When reporters report, as they have, that Trump rallies are dark and people are angry, it shows me that they haven't watched. They're just reporting like many reporters do based on other reporters and summaries, because his rallies are pretty funny and people are usually happy and laughing. And I noticed that Trump was joking pretty quickly. He said something like, he was complimenting the Secret Service, and he said the sniper shot the guy and did a great job. And then he said, could have done it a little sooner.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then at the convention, he said, he talked about what happened, and he said, "I'm never going to tell this story again."
Yeah.
And then to the next rally, he was telling the story again. He was like back. And I think he once said, everyone thought, I was going to be a nicer person afterwards. And he says, and I was. And then I realized what they did. And they were mean to me, and so I'm not going to be nice. But one of my guilty pleasures is listening to most of his speeches.
Yeah.
And I find him extremely entertaining.
He is. And the fascinating thing, I think, with Trump, and I would say Bobby Kennedy as well, they don't say the expected stuff with the cadence and the platitudes. Almost every other politician, to me as a journalist, is a little boring. And when someone doesn't speak that way, it's interesting. Trump is unexpected, but in the same respect, I noticed at his rallies since 2015, or after he started getting into a groove, he says a lot of the same stuff, if you've watched, at every rally. But instead of being bored by it, the people love it. They want him to tell the story about the snake. They want him to end the same way when he goes into that recitation of, we'll make this great again, we'll do that again. They wait for it. They mouth the words behind him. So it really is a phenomenon, and I think that says something for political figures that are not just, again, saying the platitudes that I met Joe the mechanic and his mother was an immigrant who did this thing. They're tired of hearing things that don't sound real and genuine, and they like hearing these other sorts of politicians.
Yeah, that's a brilliant observation. When I did my TED Talk 10 years ago, I kind of modeled myself on Obama, because I was just watching the way that he spoke, and he spoke slowly. And I always thought, someone important speaks slowly because they don't have to rush. And and I used to teach public speaking to some of my students. I'd think that what most people do is they rattle through it because they think maybe no one wants to listen to them. So I kind of went for the Obama model.
Yeah.
But now we see the evolution of public speaking and presidential public speaking.
That's right.
And Trump's fascinating. He'll just spin off topic. He'll have the prompter and then go off prompter and then make reference to the fact he's going off prompter.
That's right.
He does say a lot of the same things, and I know because I listen to a lot of the same speeches, but it's funny somehow. And it's what the public wants. Maybe they want that because they're consuming more independent media. Maybe it's because we're used to podcasts and things like that. Mm-hmm. And we don't want to hear that Obama type presidential speak, the State of the Union address, right? Where you please stand up and and people are just tired of that, and they want something fun. And he is funny. He's actually really funny.
He's hilarious. His timing is quite good, from a humorous standpoint. And as a journalist covering things, one thing about the Trump presidency that I found interesting, all the other presidencies I had worked under, even though I didn't do political coverage, I was, working and watching politics. And they would always have a way of getting out information. There was never a surprise, because before an Obama, a Clinton, a Bush would have some initiative or announcement, they'd leak it to the New York Times so that you'd read about it first, and then we'd do a piece on it, and then the speech would come. So there was never, you knew who was going to be appointed, you knew everything in advance. With Trump, there were surprises. Like, people would say, he's going to hold a news conference on this, but we don't know who he's going to name, or we don't know what he's going to do. And in some respects, just as a journalist watching things, that's a lot more entertaining and interesting to not have all the advance, notice of you're being told what's going to happen before the actual newsmaker makes the news, because they want to introduce it a certain way. And that didn't happen with Trump.
I love how he turned that entire relationship with the media on its head and banged everybody. And I'm not going to do a press conference today. You're not allowed on the plane, and I'm not going to do it. And the journalist, what do you mean?
And yet was the most accessible president of my time in terms of how much access he gave the press, how much time he spoke in public. those COVID daily briefings, I don't think he got enough credit for that, whether you agreed or not with how COVID was handled. He appeared at the news conference for weeks, day after day, and sat there for not just minutes, but sometimes for an hour or more, and answered questions with a level of detail that was pretty impressive. Now, I will say Clinton had that ability as well. You know, you can tell some presidents are top-line presidents, they're briefed, but they don't have an in-depth knowledge of something. Trump had, by my estimation, a really good in-depth knowledge of he had just a grasp on so many different topics down to a detail level. The way he expresses them, and some people, if you don't watch him a lot, it's by design sometimes when he says stuff. So Chris Plant, who's a guy I listen to, former colleague of CNN who has a talk show, says the press likes to take Trump literally but doesn't take him seriously. He makes generalizations like, I'm the youngest president that ever was, and you know he means I act young, I'm fit, I'm healthy. But then the press will fact check him and say he's not really the youngest president that ever was. He talks a lot in sort of generalities that may not express with the precision some of what he knows or wants to express. But the level of detail he nonetheless demonstrates when he's discussing things is, I think, pretty impressive. The whole bleach thing, remember when people accused him of saying inject bleach, which he never said, but he was referring to studies that actually did and do exist that talk about using a bleach chemical or component that could be used to cure or clean the blood. These are my paraphrases, having read the studies. There was evidence out there at the time, and there remains evidence, that these sorts of treatments can be used, and they were looking at that at the time, what could be done in terms of, it wasn't injecting bleach, and again, he didn't say that, but he was trying to refer to research that I believe he had read or been briefed on, and did it in a way that the media lampooned and didn't, I think, accurately, factually represent.
Yeah, I remember listening to those briefings every day, and they were the only voice of calm and reason, and it really meant a lot to me. And they were long, and it was just nice to have him there and talking and reassuring you and answering all the questions, and he didn't know all the answers, but it was important, and he did those for months on end, I think.
So people might be interested in the book. I tell the story. There were a lot of behind-the-scenes battles of those who were obviously, you would imagine, trying to influence policy, and whether it's vaccines or other treatments on COVID or the shutdowns. There was this push me, pull you between the Fauci factions and other scientists and authorities that were really trying to fight the Dr. Fauci factor, which turned out to be overwhelming. But I have I was meeting with a source, for example, in a parking lot of a closed restaurant during the shutdown, who was a White House advisor trying really hard to break the juggernaut of the Fauci, group that was doing things that a lot of other folks thought were not prudent. And I report on some of that battle going on in the Follow the Science book.
Hey, I know investing in crypto is scary. It takes a real leap of faith because there are so many scams, rug pulls, and bad actors out there. It's a dangerous business, which is why 95% of people lose all their money. Well, that's why I created the London Real Investment Club, so you can access the hottest deals on the planet and use the crypto bull market to create the generational wealth that you deserve. Join my team of over 100 people from around the world that are making millions of dollars behind the scenes investing in blockchain, AI, Web3 games, DeFi, Bitcoin, and more. Don't miss out. Click the link below to book a call with one of my team now. But hurry, this bull market will end soon.
I know investing in crypto can be scary. That's why you gotta join the investment club. Pull the trigger. Let's do this.